class, introducing a new project here. It's going to be in your week 11 module. It's called Object as a Self-Portrait. It's the metonym assignment. If you look in here, you'll see your assignment is to draw an object that's a self-portrait using observational methods that you've been learning. It should be in continuous tone of full value. That's the full range of blacks, grays, and white. It'll act as a visual metonym and as your self-portrait. We're going to talk about what that means. And then think about what you want to pick. You don't want to just pick a random object, and you might want to use a mind map to brainstorm some ideas. I'll show you an example in the slideshow. You need to draw it realistically using all your skills. It's going to take you about 5 hours. This is an equivalent to 1 week of lab time. Should be in full value. Your goal is to recreate the value pattern. That means capturing the shapes of all the tones. You're going to do it on large scale on 18 by 24 paper. That means if this was the page right here, the screen, then you need it to be really taken up like most of the scene, but still be in proportion. So you don't want to make it like all the way wide if it's a tall object, right? If it was a bottle, then you can't make it extra wide. You want it to be accurate. So the point is, though, if it's a bottle like this, that's tall, don't put it on a landscape. Flip your paper to portrait mode and then take up most of the page, right? So I hope you're getting the idea with my crude on-screen drawing with this recording app. But the point is, you need to fill up a lot of the page. You want it to be really large so you have a chance to get a lot of the details, okay? It's going to be graphite pencil for the sketching. That's the 2H, really hard one. Charcoal pencils for value. Your kneaded eraser to take off the extra graphite and charcoal and clean things up. Blending stump, 18 by 24 inch drawing paper. You're going to submit clear photographs. You want it to be on a neutral background, like putting it on the wall and pinning it up. And then you submit it in the critique. You'll see the discussion directions in the critique. Here's some vocabulary that are talked about in the slideshow for you to kind of understand. A metonym is, we're going to talk about what that is. You know a lot of these terms, value pattern, local color. And then it's worth 20 points. Following the assignment directions, if you don't do the assignment directions, then you're automatically not getting a C because you didn't even do the basic thing. So I don't know, but people seem to be shocked by this, but it's a pretty basic idea in college that if you don't follow assignment directions, you're not going to get a good grade on something. But not to be rude, but just kind of be really aware of that. Creative resolution, how you think about the object you pick and how you display it, how well it's completed, if it's clear in its expressiveness, and if you really pushed in and tried to really use the drawing material, the graphite, really well. Okay? So let's look at this idea of an object as a self-portrait. What is a traditional portrait? This is probably one of the most famous portraits in the world. It's in the Louvre in Paris. It's Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. And you could think of it as clearly a portrait is a picture, especially a pictorial representation of a person, usually showing the face. That's what people most often think. But also it would be a sculpted figure in 3-dimension, like a bust or a full body sculpture. It doesn't have to be only the face. This is from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, not a perfectly art dictionary, but it could be a full body portrait or down to halfway up their thigh or something. And then it could be a graphic portrayal in words. So that would be in some type of writing, autobiographical, biographical, fictional writing. So the project we're doing in a way is going to be mixing some of these ideas up because we're using a linguistic idea mixed with a picture. Okay? more to come. What is a self-portrait? These are two people who are pretty famous for self-portraits, Vincent van Gogh and Frida Kahlo. It's a portrait of an artist produced or created by that artist. So it's like an autobiography in writing. It's a person depicting themselves. There's a long history of portraiture in art going way, way back to the Renaissance. And a lot of them look very much like Mona Lisa, in a realistic, maybe ideal style. But there's also a pretty long tradition of experimental self portraits. And these are interesting for different reasons because they're communicating more than just the visage of somebody, how they look. And both these people are doing quite a bit of experimental stuff. But they're pretty naturalistic. They look like themselves. Well, there's a longer history of ones that maybe don't look exactly like the person in art history. David Hockney, famous living artist, does a lot of interesting work. This is interesting because it's like collage cut out on newspaper. Maybe looks a bit like him, but doesn't look like him also. And it's the materiality of the paper. And here in 1972, Picasso, late in life, facing death, is interesting title for this, self-portrait facing death, because he's getting older, getting towards the end of his life. It's looking very, very cubist and geometric and very much about emotion and the ideas. Jean Michel Basquiat, we're missing the J on that, is a famous artist. He died very young, and he worked with, he was kind of a contemporary of someone like Andy Warhol, who liked his work a lot. So he's only 28 when he died. Has not a lot of his paintings, but they're all mostly in museums, and he's pretty famous. And this is called Self-Portrait as a Heel. He actually wrote it in there. He uses a lot of writing and different things in his work, and definitely experimental, trying to talk about him as a graphic representation, kind of graffiti, a number, all sorts of things going on are interesting. So he's mixing words and letters and pictures. This is a really interesting called Self-Portrait, that's German, Self-Portrait by Gerhard Richter in 1996. He's a really interesting artist. And what do you see about this one is how it becomes like a blurred out, almost like you're looking through a window that's foggy, glassy, frosted, or a reflection in a mirror with steam or something like that, in this painting. So that's really interesting. And it talks about, what's it mean, I should say, to kind of make you think about it, to have a depiction of yourself that is not so clearly an image of self, right? Becoming material and painterly and about surface and kind of like almost like an immanence of somebody, but who's not quite there, like ghostly, right? Not being known or being known. There's a lot of things happening here. And then some portraits, even way back in post-impressionistic times, he was a contemporary of Van Gogh, Gauguin, started using other kind of fanciful things, like he put a halo on his head and a snake in his hand, and he's dealing with, you know, biblical iconography as part of his ideas here. And he was an interesting guy who lived in the South Pacific for a while and was in search of the ideal sort of place, like returning to Eden and all kinds of things. Apples in the back, you know, so he's playing with the Garden of Good and Evil type of idea, Garden of Eden in this piece. There's a guy like Norman Rockwell, this is really interesting. He was a cover artist for the Saturday Evening Post for like a really long time, 40 years. Eventually they did an article about him, and so he did the cover for his own article, main feature article. And this is interesting because here he is looking at himself, drawing himself. It's called Triple Self-Portrait. And this becomes about the objects that he picked. Look, he has different types of purposeful objects. Up here is a famous portrait, self-portrait of Rembrandt. Okay, there's drawings of himself. There's very much strong idea of Americana. He's got this golden mirror with eagle on top in American. There's something to do with a helmet, maybe like a Roman type of helmet there. Books and something he's drinking, a wastebasket. So it's artist in his studio. It's very much part of this whole thing. This is another one, experimental, from just before the turn of the 20th century, and 1895. Edvard Munch, self-portrait with a skeleton. So he's adding another feature, an object, to help become part of it. A strong object, a skeletal feature, arm of a skeleton arm. This guy also, Norman Rockwell, definitely the objects are very much a part of what he's communicating. So this is pushing us in this direction. These are all details of these paintings. The snake and halo, I'm showing you the snake. I'm showing you this really basic still life as part of Norman Rockwell's, with the book and the glass and the palette, and then Munch having the skeleton arm. So these type of ideas, this is what we're pushing into. We're going to be doing an experimental self-portrait using an idea from linguistics called metonymy. And what do we mean by metonymy? What is the word definition? The substitution of the name of an attribute or adjunct for that of the thing meant. For example, suit for business executive, or the track for horse racing. Okay? You're like, that makes no sense. Well, it's going to make sense. This is not what I meant by lend me your ears, taking your ears off and giving to them. It's referring to a thing by a related concept. Or that's even not a great analogy, to be honest with you. It's more like taking a particular thing and letting it be a stand-in for the greater idea or identity. This is a really great example. Hopefully you know what this building is. You've probably seen it before in some sort of newspaper or TV or something. It's a giant white building. It's a white, wait for it, house. It is the White House. So if you ever read the newspaper, watch TV or anything about news and politics, which are all the rage right now, obviously, because, well, they're always all the rage because everything's, intensified in the world these days, and news is everywhere. But anyway, I'm not a huge fan of politics. I don't like to follow it day by day, but I like to stay aware of things. That's just a little aside. Nonetheless, I think this is a great example of this, which is they'll talk about in the newspaper, the White House said blah, 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 blah. Well, according to the White House, the statistics for, okay, what do they mean by the White House? They do not mean this White House here, this actual building in Washington, D.C. said, hey, the statistics, they don't mean it talked, right? I mean, it's obvious, but nonetheless. What do they mean? They mean the presidency, the executive branch of our government, did something. And instead of saying the presidency with all of his cabinet and his guys and his whole system and his da-da-da-da-da and his secretaries and undersecretaries, they just use this term, the White House. Same thing happens in England. If you go over to England, it is what? What would they say this about? Think about it for a second with me. They would say it about the crown. So in England, when they're talking about the monarchy, they say the crown. This is Queen Elizabeth in all her glory. This is her crown. It's a pretty splendid object. So they say the crown instead of the White House, because the crown is the office and its authority it's a symbol of that, right? It's a fill-in, it's a symbol. And so metonymy is a type of symbolism and metaphor in a way too. So substitution is a symbolism of the name or an attribute or a thing. Lend me a hand. Ooh, that would be gross, huh? What's it mean? You use your hands to help me do it, right? So we're going to be picking something in our life that's like a crown that could be a stand-in for us. This is a bad joke, but Hannibal Lecter on the red carpet. Who are you wearing? Who are you wearing means what designer's clothing are you wearing? Usually on the red carpet, and he says one of the security guards. Rough. I like Doug Savage. I don't know a lot of his work, but this one's pretty hilarious. It happens a lot in politics too. This cartoon is a metaphor. No newspaper reader will actually think you're a disgusting insect. It's just your bullying abuse of power that's disgusting. But there's nothing funny about calling someone a cockroach at a political rally where followers tend to take things literally. Okay, bad. This one's a way worse joke than this one's a little bit more funny. Nonetheless, they're both a little bit cheesy dad jokes. I am a dad, so I have to go for these things. Point is, you're going to be picking an object that's like a crown. It doesn't have to be a crown, but it'll be a stand-in for you as a portrait. So draw an object that acts as a self-portrait. This will be an example of visual metonymy and act as your self-portrait. So think about what you pick and why you pick it. Don't just choose a random object like your car keys or your hat. It could be your hat though, but don't just randomly pick it. Think about it. I used to make people do this with a pair of shoes. So I'm going to show you some examples of shoes. That was because I had the idea that if you want to understand someone's life, you walk a mile in their shoes, which is a metaphor for living their experience. But I took it and I said, hey, let's do shoes. That'll be interesting. But I'm opening it up further to other objects because I think it's better for you to be able to do different things. This is a student's work, really beautifully done, shoes. And this shows you kind of level of craftsmanship I'm looking for to have the highlights. And she used these beautiful contour lines to express it. Yeah, really beautiful. And you can think about how she laid them out and did shadowing and how much light she had to be part of her portrait, right? It's pretty elegant shoes, high heels, put in a way that's almost like her stance, how she would stand in them, and have a feeling of a person there. These are another example of shoes, but very different type of feeling shoes, still high heels, but Nike, more sporty, and they're arranged in a way that's a lot different. It doesn't feel like someone's exactly standing in them, whereas these ones do feel like someone's standing in them, and they're much more cozy shoes than these ones here, right? They're different use, different kind of feeling to them, and a different type of person who would be showing these ones. This person may own shoes like that, but they picked these type of shoes to be a portrait of themselves. Just like this person picked these type of shoes instead of these type of shoes. So she owned them, of course, but also she picked them because they feel like what she wanted to identify herself with. There's a sort of idea here that you could get into, maybe that I'm not trying to go into, but people have it as I shop, therefore I am. There's like, yeah, I think, therefore I am is a famous expression. Well, I'm not just trying to get you to think about commercialism, but what you own and buy and pick does have something to do with you. I'm trying to also make you think about what kind of position you have maybe in the world or don't have, what you like to do, what you especially identify with in maybe your beliefs, albeit I want you to be aware of not getting too stuck in one type of way of thinking about this, is what I'm trying to say. Don't just do your shoes because you saw shoes here. Don't just do your car keys, but think about the things that are important to you. Okay? If you don't know what to do, can't think of what to do, you're having a hard time knowing what to pick, do a mind map. Put yourself here in the middle and say, this is a version that says items I carry every day. Say, here I am. Oh, what do I have? I'm a student. I'm a mom. I'm a son. I'm a daughter. I like to draw. I hate drawing. I'm going to be a nurse. And just kind of go through a lot of things. I hate blah blah blah, I like blah blah blah, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I don't like politics, and get through all this and kind of get to something that's interesting to you. How you display the object will also be part of communicating the idea. This is an example of a charcoal drawing someone did of a hairdryer hanging up. It's pretty kind of intense in a strange angle. If this was a portrait of someone and this was a portrait of someone, which neither of these were submitted as portraits, but we could identify the idea that they may be a cosmetologist, or they care about fashion and hair a lot, or they're a product designer, they design this product. Well, this would be communicating very different ideas here. This one's very systematic, this one's not. Okay, so how you display it, just like I said, this one feels like the person standing in the shoes, and this one, they're obviously not because you can't contort your leg that direction. Communicate something. This one feels self-assured, standing forth in the world, ready to make an impression. This one feels like I want to display something and I also want to hide part of myself and my personality, right? What does this make you feel? It's a little bit blown out. Think about it for a second. We have a hammer, cup of some type of beverage that's probably hot because it's a mug, some nails scattered. It feels very informal, but also kind of staged, with strong light coming from this direction. Someone who likes to do things, they're building something, drink coffee. It feels like someone who's crafty, right? A particular type of person who's careful, but also informal. Here's another great example. This is made in charcoal by Emily Copeland. She's a hyper-realistic charcoal artist that's really incredible that she does this. This is the level you can get to with charcoal. So don't shoot for the dung heap. Shoot for the stars. If you don't hit, you'll still do a really good job. Better to shoot for the stars and miss than shoot for the manure pile and hit, as my 8th grade math teacher used to tell us. So go for something really, do your very best work. If someone picked an Indian motorcycle to do for this project, that would be a really interesting object with a lot of detail, but it would say a lot about them, what they like to do. This is vintage, old school. Motorcycles have a lot of ideas about freedom, riding on your own, being out in the wind. So a lot of things here. This is something somebody picked to do baseball. They care about it. They grew up with it. They have it in their family. All these type of things. So that's something. Boxing gloves. This is again by Emily Copeland, but these would be something that would work very well. If this was someone's career goals, aspiration, their dad gave it to them, they used to do this their whole life. There's a lot of things here, right? Chess. This is something someone would pick about mathematics, chess, being a chess master. It's difficult to kind of weed out things, but don't spend forever trying to figure out what to draw that you don't give yourself enough time to draw it, but think about it and then go from there. This is an interesting piece by her as well. All the reflections. See how there's part of a room in there? I think you could put something in a particular location. You can stage it like it's on the board, or it's got a reflection of something around it. If this was somebody's, you could say that they love entertaining. This silver could be something that they inherited. There's a lot of type of things going on here. This is a good piece, giving us a basic background. It's a little grainy, sorry for the photo, but they love tea, coziness, rituals, maybe they read and drink tea. There's a lot of things like that. So you have a lot of options, but if you can't think of something, do a mind map. And these are examples of the quality of work we're looking for to get high craftsmanship quality. Things are clean, well erased. There's a well considered background in some of these, or it's on a clean neutral space. There's really crispness. There's darks and lights. There's good shadows with darks. Okay? I recommend using a strong light source and putting it on a neutral background or in a specific place, like I just said. This is on the chessboard. So you want really strong light source. This is shown clearly in this painting. That means you probably want to use a directional light if you can, and keep the room a bit darkened so you can really see the shadows. You're going to start with using an accurate line drawing before you add the tones. Use your observational methods, sight, see, and measure, right? And get something. You could use something organic and natural too for this. Your hand is not really an object, so I wouldn't want you to do that, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something with a little bit more organic quality to it. It doesn't have to be machine made. But you want an accurate observational drawing with your 2H pencil. And then you're going to start adding the tones to it like we've talked about in other modules a lot. How do you deal with the idea that we talked about local color? If you're painting in color like Wayne Thibault does, then you don't have to worry about it. You just try to replicate it or change it. But here, this is a red apple on the left and a green apple on the right. We talked about how colors have an equivalent tone or value, right? Yellows being really bright and light tones down to like purples. Well, you have to think about what tone they are, and then you create that, and then you can add the darker darks and erase for the highlights. So you're translating into black and white achromatic medium. And that's going to give you a tonal pattern. You're following the logic of the light. We talked about this quite a bit. And I want you to remember everything you've been learning about your value scales. Because you can match up these lightest values to like right here, the brightest parts to like a white. There's barely any white in this picture. You have these darker ones, for example, right in here, and the black up in here. So you want to start adding the tone, that mid to light tone. I would do even light here for everything in shade, and then build it up to the darker and keep the lighter side where you know the light is hitting from this direction in this piece, right? This is a photograph, but the light's hitting from that direction. So that's what you're going for. And we've talked a lot about this. I've shown you examples. So continue on with that theme. Not that theme, that skill set that you've been developing. All right, guys. I believe in you, and I think you're going to get some interesting portraits. I really want you to think about the object and pick something that's really interesting that can really give you a chance to spend some time drawing something with detail that makes an interesting version of a self-portrait that's experimental. All right, take care. I'll talk to you soon. If you have questions, as ever, feel free to contact me in all the ways that I'm available to you on Canvas, through the inbox, in all the different ways, okay? All right, take care.